So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the unlicensed counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor, and as always, so darn grateful to be here. Just another beautiful day out here in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you don't know, I've now seen some new digs. It has been an interesting last 2 weeks, to say the least. But first, let me start by saying a very big thank you to my friends here at Star Worldwide who have helped bring me back as my show was getting ready to transition to another studio. Worked with the team here. So grateful to be back here, honestly. Happy to be working with Robin, Rob, everybody, Dave. Big thank you to kind of help them get this show back up and going and where I feel like it needs to be, right? So really appreciate you. Good to see you. Good to be back in this chair as well, too. So on that topic, things change. We were changing. Had a couple thoughts. I've been doing a 4-part series on the vices. I still have to upload last week's episode. It was part of the bumpy transition, which was on sex addiction, which we're going to still post, or we may re-record it here in the studio as well, too. But over the last 2 weeks, you get into these situations sometimes where tensions can get heated, right? You have some conversation back and forth. And, I have found that it's easy to kind of get into some of these conflicts sometimes. So I thought I'd take a break from the vice thing right now and do a quick episode on conflict resolution, right? This is something that came to my mind over the last few weeks. Not that I was in some bitter, drawn-out argument, but sometimes when you get into conversations with people that you work with very closely, things can escalate a little bit. And, I had a great rapport with a friend of mine here at the studio and things like that, and it started to deteriorate. And I was like, damn. It was really frustrating, eating on me. And you know what happened? 2 adults got on the phone and were able to hammer out these issues. And I'm so grateful that we were able to do it. As you can tell, a lot of gratitude this episode. But there were a couple takeaways for me over the course of the last 2 weeks. And I thought, let's pause the Vices episode. We can revisit that, and we'll start that again next week. But let me just talk about some things that I learned, some things I were thinking about around conflict resolution, right? Maybe yours wasn't necessarily around your podcast and your podcast studio and all that kind of stuff, but maybe yours around work or family or in-laws or diet or exercise or friends or whatever it is. I mean, we all have conflict that rises up in our life. And really, what are some healthy and unhealthy ways of being able to address that and really move through it? And, I learned a little bit, quite a bit over the last 2 weeks as well, too. So before we dig into that topic today, I obviously want to start and say thank you, as always, to our friends over at ShareTech. If you're in the market for an at-home drug or alcohol test, go to betterdrugtest.com. This is the test that all the leading treatment centers and outpatient programs are telling their clients to use when they discharge from these programs as well, too. Go to betterdrugtest.com, pick up this test that cannot be cheated and is the most comprehensive test in the terms of number of substances that it screens for. Betterdrugtest.com. Thanks again to our friends at ShareTech. And as always, I like to plug the nonprofit work that I do as well, too. Visit us at thestopstartshere.org. This is the youth drug abuse prevention organization that I'm very, very passionate about. A group of individuals got together and said, look, we see a lot of drug prevention messaging out there. I think it's kind of dated. I think it's kind of stale, and we wanted to breathe some fresh life into this, and we wanted to do that via social media with edgy, bold, raw, creative content, and that's what we keep putting out there. So you probably by now have seen some of our ads if you're on social media as well, too, talking about our mission and message and different things like that. So visit us at The Stop Starts Here or follow us at Hardstop Official on all the usual channels. And again, the Unlicensed Counselor got our YouTube channel up and running. I don't know how many we're up to. Probably like 12, 11 people, something like that. I think we're adding 1 or 2 a week. But hey, 1,000-mile journey begins with single step, as our old friend Confucius says, I believe. So, okay, back to the topic at hand. Again, we're going to circle back to the vices, kind of a 4-part series that I'm doing. We've talked about gambling, we've talked about sex addiction, and I've got 2 more fun ones that we're going to talk about as well. But conflict resolution was on my mind, right? So what is conflict? It's a natural part of human interaction that arises when 2 or more parties are having different opinions, needs, goals, or values. Again, this can be in the workplace, it can be with friends, it can be with family, it can be social groups, or political groups. Imagine that, right? conflict is always challenging, but there can be some opportunities for growth. And that's really what got me thinking over the last, week or two is again, I'm not trying to say there was some major conflict, but it was just like, we got on email and we were having different agreements, and I know how I can get, and I can dig my heels in. And when the other party starts to dig your heels in, then you maybe over email too, you can say things that you may not always say if you were just talking to that person in person or on the phone or something like that. So I thought it'd be a good one to kind of bring to the audience as well too, because I guarantee almost all of us, if you're not in some type of conflict right now, you will be in the near future. And what can you do as you're going through that to maybe be thinking about some of these things and handle it a little bit better, and handle it better than I did as well too, right? So, where does conflict come from? Like, what are the sources of conflict? That can be from miscommunication. It can be personality differences, competing needs, scarcity of resources. I've even seen it come up from just like tone and things like that as well too. It's just like, I don't like the way that person just talked to me or spoke to me. I was coming out of hot yoga the other day, and they got a little studio where they do, I don't know if it's, facial treatments and work and things. When you kind of get out of the hot yoga room, you kind of plop down in these chairs that are kind of right out in front of it. And they do, I don't know if it's Botox or fillers, not really my cup of tea, as you can see, and nothing like that going on with the unlicensed counselor yet, even though it feels like we're in the home of that here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And, it looked like maybe a lady who was waiting for some type of treatment, and, everybody kind of comes in, plops out, hot and steamy, your brain's kind of foggy from all the work that you just did. And then, she walks out kind of in a huff, and then another younger gal comes in and was like, hey, this is for, the treatment room. You guys need to get out of here. And all of us who are kind of regulars right there just kind of turned and looked, and it's like, okay, like, I get it, and if that's the rules, that's the rules. But I think, and we actually talked about this after, like a week later at the same class, I think it was the tone that this kind of person came in and kind of addressed us in a condescending, kind of sharp, kind of rude kind of manner. And it kind of rubbed everybody the wrong way. So I don't know, just a small example on how tone can kind of create some of this conflict as well too, as you're talking about sources. So then there's some kind of types of conflict as well. That can be interpersonal or intrapersonal, right? Intergroup or intragroup. And each one of these, as you're trying to navigate how to resolve this conflict, could require a different approach in terms of how to successfully resolve it. Because look, I've resolved a lot of conflict in my life with anger and yelling and beating my hand on the desk and getting pissed and storming out. I'd like to see, as I get older, myself improve. And I have, by the way, dramatically through counseling, through, I think, yoga, as I always talk about, that people are probably annoyed at, but through understanding and acknowledging how I have been in the past with handling these things and kind of going to anger as my default thing and really walking away from that as I've gotten a little bit older. Because I feel like it's like the easy way to kind of deal with conflict, right? It's like you're just going to let anger kind of step in and run. Like, it doesn't seem very mature. Obviously not a successful approach, right? So, here's a couple different ways that I wanted to throw out to the audience to kind of how you may want to approach, right, conflict, right? So let's start by just recognizing and acknowledging that a conflict exists, right? This is kind of step one, is to recognize that its presence and that you want to seek a solution, right? And I think that can be done, you can do it by yourself, or you can maybe mention it to the other person, like, look, I think we're getting off course here, right? I think we're getting sideways. What I'm saying, what you're saying, it feels like we're escalating here. Let's maybe we can pause this, maybe we can revisit that, right? Now, in my example over the last 2 weeks, a lot of the communication around, my conflict was happening over email, right? And I have found this time and time again, and why I didn't recognize it sooner and why I let it go 2 weeks is, error Steve on not getting to this solution faster before, one of our friends who's in the studio here kind of suggested, like, hey, you guys just got to get on the phone, right? You just get on the phone and talk this out. And I'm like, yeah, of course. That's what mature, adult, reasonable people do. And by the way, when we did, it was resolved within 5 minutes off one phone call. And we had 2 weeks of emails kind of going back and forth at each other that were getting increasingly snippier at each other, right? And it's like, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. right? So again, acknowledging that conflict. And I started out with a text just saying, hey, I think we got off course, right? I think we got off course. Can we hop on a phone call when you're free and we can just, talk through this, right? That was just an example of how I started out doing it, right? Now, the next way to approach and kind of understanding the conflict is understanding all perspectives, right? So you really are trying to seek the perspective and some understanding of all parties involved. This includes actively listening, some empathy, and keeping an open mind as you're going through this as well, too, because it's easy to just get so entrenched in what you want to accomplish, what you need, what you're not getting, how pissed you are, how angry you are, blah, 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 blah. But taking a step back from that, right? So taking a step back, not hitting send on that email right away when you're in fiery mode, right? Not hitting send on that text message that you just pounded out in 30 seconds in response to that. Take a step back, take a breather, do some breathing exercises, start to think about, okay, where are they coming from, right? Where are they coming from? How is this possibly being perceived on their side? Now let's take a quick moment and let's think about this, right? It took me a little bit to kind of get to that step because, again, you get caught up in the thing. And I think for me in my wiring, there's almost like a competitiveness too as well, where it's like, no, I just want to get what I need to get and get my point across and get that said and make sure I'm heard. When it's like, okay, wait a second, time out, take a step back, let's slow the roll, let's think about this from other areas than just myself, right? And number 3 on ways to kind of approach a conflict, let's identify some common goals, right? We're going to have our differences, no big deal there, but identifying those common goals can help shift the focus from opposing positions to what do we have in common? What are our shared interests here as well, too? And that can be the way we start to bridge that gap to hopefully meet back and resolve whatever conflict that's going to be going, right? So thinking about, what do we have more in common than instead of all the differences that we've got going, right? And number 4 is communicate openly and respectfully, right? This is a crucial step because I am as guilty, I'm putting the hand up over here as anybody else. I can get on there over text, over email, which is fairly impersonal, right? Even though there's a real person there, you're just firing away. And it's easy to say things, and, I get them right back too. And that's not the healthy way to do it, right? It's not that healthy. We all know this, but how do we catch ourselves in the moment where before you hit send, before you fire that email off, right? So you want to make sure that you're expressing your own needs and concerns clearly and appropriately and listening without any other judgment that's going on in this thing as well, too. So easier said than done as we're in the moment, but that's why I think it's key to, I've seen those rules where it's like if you're angry, you got to walk away from the keyboard for at least an hour or two. I am gotten a lot better just in general in business and with family. It's like, okay, message came through via email, via text. Don't really like what was said in that message, text, or email, right? Typically, Steve is, and I like to respond to things quickly. When they come up, I respond. When they come up, I respond. Not in even just in a business way. That's just like how I do things. When it comes to things that I don't necessarily love, I am moving much slower to respond, right? I am just slowed down the speed at which I respond. Give myself some more time. I have seen that my responses are dramatically better than when I just sit and respond almost instantaneously, right? Or even when a couple minutes within that comes out. Give it some time, let it breathe. Something else could be on my mind that's clouding my judgment, or if I'm rushing to get a response back in. All of these things lead to responses which can then escalate the conflict. And I tell you, I just was out skiing. I took my daughter, a 4-year-old, up to Park City, and we did some skiing. By the way, turned into a great little skier. And another side note, it's amazing how flexible these little things are. It was like Gumby. I mean, there was one time she fell and her skis are pointing, knees are going the other way. It would have taken 18 ACL, MCL, whatever, CL surgeries to repair that if it would have happened to you or I. But these 4-year-olds, man, they are so resilient. But when I'm up there with my family, right, and I got my brother and his 3 kids, a growing number of kids, my parents were staying with, and it's like, stuff can happen, right? Nobody's being mean intentionally, I don't think, but it's like, And let's go out of our way to make sure that we're responding maybe even a little more slowly, not in a way to like drag it out, but to make sure that your responses, when you're all in kind of close proximity and quarters, you don't even want the appearance of a tone or kind of a shortness or something like that. So it's just, I go into trips like that, just much more mindful about how I can make sure that I set myself up for success when I'm dealing with that as well too. And it's by doing, a lot of these things, especially in the slow response thing is the one that I've been practicing quite a bit. Okay, so now next up, all right, you know what conflict is. I don't even think we need to go that long into what conflict is. Been there, done that. Some of you may be experts at resolving conflict. I have not been an expert in that in my adult life, so I've spent a lot of time trying to work in on being better at this. And I don't know why, but sometimes my wiring, I find myself in conflict. Maybe it's because I don't just go with the flow, but I have opinions and thoughts on things, and I'm not to be difficult, but just because you said it doesn't mean it's right. And I'm not out to challenge it, but I think there's a better, smarter way, or maybe you haven't thought about this way. I'm not one to share. I'm not one to just kind of stuff it in and not say anything. I'm going to share it. And what do you know? Having an opinion on matters certainly stirs the pot. And again, this isn't even going on the political side of the thing. That's a whole other ball of wax. But I guess some of this could really dovetail into it as well. But okay, so you know what conflict is. Now let's talk about some ways to potentially resolve, a conflict successfully, and maybe some pros and cons that go along with it. So number one on the old resolving conflict is negotiation, right? So this is just two parties finding a mutually acceptable solution to a problem, right? You're just getting together, you try and hammer out a way that we can get back on track. So the pro is obviously this empowers your parties, encourages direct communications, and offers flexible solutions. Probably one of the easier ways to do it. And I've always found that if both parties leave a negotiation not feeling like they got exactly what they wanted, is probably a successful negotiation, right? It's mine. Now, the con side of a negotiation is it can be a little time consuming, right? It does take some back and forth in order to make sure that we hash this thing out. It can be less effective if there's some type of power imbalances where one person is able to kind of dictate terms to the other. And occasionally it may escalate tensions as well, too, as you're going through some of these negotiations. That's when you see people storm out of rooms and do different things like that. So just keep this in mind. If you are in a negotiation, respond slow, watch the tone, and try and stay level-headed and keep an open mind as you're in these things, right? And I think it can be a very successful way to resolving conflict as well, too. And then obviously you've probably heard of mediation as well too, right? So this would be the second way that we could potentially resolve conflict as well. This is where a neutral third party facilitates communication to guide parties to a mutual agreement, right? So an outside party. So, I'm not speaking just in like a legal sense as well too. You could be going to a counselor. When I was married and we went to a counselor, right? It was like, we had different opinions on matters, and we were kind of using them as a third-party mediator to try and help us wade through, some of the things that were going on, right? I think it's a wise way to do things. Again, that could be clergy, that could be a counselor, it could be legal. And instead of going right to judges and courts and things, they actually offer mediation. I know that I've actually been involved in that as well, too. So it's like, instead of just filing, spending thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on attorneys, you can actually go to a mediator and be like, hey, can we come together on an agreement here and amend our parenting plan or whatever that is, right? So the pro of this would be, this is kind of a neutral. It's supposed to be a neutral facilitation person who kind of helps us along. It should ensure, some confidentiality and hopefully enhance understanding as well, too. Now, the con side of this is that it also depends on the mediator's skills. Can they kind of help facilitate this as well, too? And sometimes, and I know this happened to me when I was in marital counseling, it was like the potential preconception of bias. It was like, well, certainly seems like she's taking the side of the ex-wife there quite a bit, And so, keep that in mind. And then it also doesn't guarantee, a decision or resolution as well, too, But I always think it's a good first place to start in these things as well, too. So number 3 on possible solutions for resolving conflict is collaboration, right? So each party makes some parties work together cooperatively to find a solution that satisfies everyone's needs. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it's kind of like negotiation, right? you're aiming for win-win solutions, encourages innovative outcomes, and improves kind of dynamics. Hopefully, that's the goal in this, in kind of collaborating all of these things together. Now, the con to this collaboration is it can be time-consuming, right? If you're constantly having to try and get together to work towards something, you're going to have to be probably a lot of time commitment. Might lead to compromises on some things that you might not want to, just to kind of get together on a topic to resolve this. But it's an option. We just want to put out options. Find one of these that may work for you or that you think you could implement and kind of get going on this. Number 4 is compromise, right? So, each party makes concessions to reach mutually acceptable solutions, right? I mean, very similar again to kind of negotiation as well, but hopefully kind of can get you there a little bit quicker. I mean, and that is really one of the pros of this, is kind of leads to quick resolutions, right? Be like, hey, what can we compromise on here? Let's not even negotiate. Let's just find what we can get to find a compromise and get going on this. It may or may not create a sense of fairness, but it can be very practical, right? You may not be 100%, so on the con side, you may not be 100% satisfied with it, but look, you got to a compromise, and hopefully you got there relatively quickly. And on some things, you might overlook deeper issues because you're just trying to get to a solution and trying to get there rather quickly. So just keep those things in mind as you're kind of looking to employ one of these strategies, right? Next up on my list, let me turn the page. I actually used a stapler today for my show notes. I'm getting more professional, Robin. That's what we do here at the Unlicensed Counselor, right? Now that I'm back in my home studio. And last but not least is adaptation, right? So adaptation, excuse me. One party yields to the needs or demands of others, often to preserve kind of the relationship. The con side of this is that this could get some resentment going and may encourage some dependency and could undermine some of your personal needs on this as well, too. Now, the adaptation on the pro side could quickly resolve a conflict, preserve relationships, and demonstrate some flexibility as well, too. So, there's just a couple things on there that I think are worthwhile. The last one that I want to mention, that I didn't touch on right now, is one that I used to kind of do this. And it actually is an important point that can be used, but needs to be used sparingly and appropriately. And that's really avoidance, right? So in some cases, completely avoiding this may actually, in avoiding the person or avoiding kind of creating it, may actually be the correct solution. I overused this as a solution to many of my problems, meaning I'd literally close the door, walk away, things escalate, heat up, and I'm just like, I shut down, right? I shut down. And I think it's actually okay from time to time, but I would shut down and never circle back. And so then things would be left unsaid. The same issues would arise. We would never make, I'm just talking kind of almost in reference to my marriage. I think it also happened when I was growing up as a young adult as well, too. It was just like leave, close the door, not address the issue. And those things then never get resolved, and they kind of keep popping up and keep popping up. Now, sometimes avoiding conflict may be appropriate if the issue is trivial or the cost of the confrontation actually outweighs the benefit of the solution as well, too. So I think you just need to really use this one sparingly, but understand that it's okay to employ from time to time. And for me, I'll take, family trip for an example of really kind of just letting some things go to avoid the confrontation. If it's really just a minor thing, is that going to matter in five minutes or tomorrow or a year from now? Using that, we've all heard of that kind of thinking process as you go through this. So thinking of those things like, hey, is this really going to matter? Do I really need to bring this up? Or can I just let this one go, even though at the moment maybe those feelings kind of flood up, rush up to you, but then be able to go, okay, let's just not. Let's not go there. Let's not break this thing up. Let's not make it an issue. So I think kind of avoiding, potential conflict is a skill that can actually be valuable and appropriate in a lot of these times. And by the way, it can save a crap ton of headache and stress as well too, right? I mean, we only have so much emotional, energy available to us in any given day. If you're just trying to look for a conflict in every single thing that comes up, which feels like it's almost what social media is designed for, you're just going to end up miserable. I mean, you're going to be an unhappy person walking around just angry all the time. And as it pertains to social media on this topic, let's use the avoidance approach a little bit more. Just because you see a comment or see a clip or watch the news or listen to this political person or that political person, you're allowed to just move on, right? You can just let it go and go, that's annoying. I don't like that at all. And not have to go to Twitter and not have to go to Facebook and not have to go to Instagram and then write something or stir the pot or kind of contribute to this beast. Because again, now you're sapping and tapping your energy into this as well too. And then somebody's going to say something back to you. And all of a sudden you're caught in this thing, right? You're caught in this thing. It's different if you're trying to engage in like a real dialogue or I have an opinion and you welcome kind of the feedback and things like that. Like I understand. I like to get into interesting topics. But if you're in there just to stir the pot, right? Just because you heard something that you don't agree with and I got to add my 2 cents into this conversation, or you could let it go and go for a walk, right? Which way of life is you think is going to fill your cup a little bit more, right? Constantly pouring out energy into online and social media and getting into these conflicts that mean nothing and will go nowhere, nor will they ever be resolved. Or just kind of choosing to be like, yeah, don't like that opinion, moving on, right? So, again, sorry to take a quick time out from the 4-part Vices series. We're going to get back to our regularly scheduled programming next week as we go into that, which will be the start of March Madness. We already hit on gambling. But I got some other fun stuff to talk about. I just thought, things that are going on in my world that I think are applicable to everybody else that's out there, eyes and ears wise, let's just go ahead and start talking about it, right? Let's start talking about it. We're all going to run into conflict. Let's talk about how to see it coming down the pipe, what we can do about it, and how to get better at it, right? Seems pretty simple. Hopefully the unlicensed counselor can help you out and think through these things a little bit more. So that's all I got. Now back from the 6th floor here down in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Steve Moak. I am the unlicensed counselor. Until next time, thank you very much.